Okay, guys. So we are doing supply side policies today. When you look at supply side policies, they're probably very important for an economy's perspective. And I'm going to explain this why this is very important. When we look at policies, there are policies which are demand side policies, and then there are policies which are supply side policies. We looked at demand side policies, which were basically fiscal policy and monetary policy. These policies are trying to make the AD change. Like if you want to alter the AD, that's when you do demand side policies. And the advantage of demand side policies, of course, is this that they are very quick. You can see the impact happening very quickly, especially fiscal policy. It's pretty quick when it comes to getting your desired results and so on. But supply side policies are also very desirable. And the reason is simply because aggregate supply curve will shift to the right. Let's say if we do a supply side policy, because that's focusing on supply side, but all the four goals are met. When you look at this diagram, when the aggregate supply curve shift to the right, number one is the price level is going down, the price level falls. Number two, your real GDP rises, right? Number three, you can see this because real GDP is going up. Unemployment is also going down. Unemployment is going down. As you can see this, that because GDP goes up, unemployment goes down. And number four, big advantage that we can see here is this that because the price level is going down, exports become cheaper, imports become expensive, and is also going up or can potentially go up. So one of the best thing about supply side policy is this that there is no like conflict with no conflict with other goals. So in a way, for a country to really actually develop and become more sort of have a higher living standard, one could totally argue that we should be doing what we call supply side policy, where the aggregate supply curve will shift to the right and actually will result in the economy to do better in all aspects, be it price level, GDP, unemployment, and net exports. Does that make sense? So, what are supply side policies? Let's talk about that. But before I do that, is there any question about whatever we've done so far? Any questions, guys, before we move on? Are we good to move on, Muzna and Shayan and everyone? Okay, awesome. So, guys, supply side policies are government attempts to increase productivity, okay, and shift AS to the right. Supply side policies increase our long run capacity of the economy to produce and can lead to improvement in the international competitiveness of the economy. So, if you want the international competitiveness of the economy to go up, supply side policies are the way to go forward. And this leads to an improvement in the current account of the balance of payment, as we can see, because your X minus M will go up. Uh, However, these benefits will only be seen in the long run. So one of the biggest problem of supply side policies is this that you can't see the supply side policy to impact in the short run. The kind of things that we try to do, we try to make the economy go better. We want the economy to grow. We want probably education and improvement in productivity to happen. So the downside, the biggest downside of supply side policies is the fact that it only works in the long run. So from a policy perspective, like if you really want short run impact to happen, you might go for demand side policies. But if you really want the economy to go better, to do well, you want to use supply side policies, which are long run and which will show its result only in the long run. Does that make sense? Are we good? Any questions? So, what are supply side policies, guys? How can we improve productivity and so on? Well, supply side policies, I just talked about this in 1 minute ago, that it can help you lower inflation because aggregate supply will shift to the right. It will also help you lower unemployment. Why? Because, of course, when GDP goes up, unemployment goes down. So, it can help us reduce different kinds of unemployment. structural, fictional, and real wage unemployment. Basically, this we'll discuss more in A2. But if you look at the different kinds of unemployment, because we are increasing education, because we are increasing skills, and because we are also improving what we call information gaps are reduced. All of this would mean people will have more information about jobs out there. People will be more skilled and educated in the long run through supply side policies. So it's improving our economic growth, it's improving our balance of payment, and as a result of that, it helps us achieve all the four goals that we want. So what are the examples of supply side policies? Well, one of the examples of supply side policies is that we go for privatization. We end up selling government owned assets, which are basically overemploying, which are inefficient, which are not looking at profitability. So it is argued that the private sector is more efficient in running businesses. Some may disagree with that, of course, but they are relying more on profitability and efficient allocation of resources. And as a result of that, privatization is the first step forward towards uh, what we call supply side policies. Second is also linked with privatization is something called deregulation, where you break monopoly power, bring more competition. So if there is a firm in a private sector which is really powerful, or if it's a public monopoly, guys, you will try to sort of improve that too. Okay, you try to sort of break the power of monopoly. Any questions before we move on? So what's the third thing? The third thing we do is basically called reducing the taxes and state welfare benefits. So just going back, so deregulation is basically making more competition happen. Third is have a lower sort of involvement of the government by reducing taxes, because remember, taxes can have a disincentivizing effect where people do not have an incentive to work because they feel that they will be taxed too heavily. Similarly, state welfare benefits is another way to go forward, where you basically remove state welfare benefits like unemployment benefits, because lower benefits may also encourage the unemployed to take more jobs. And then comes the increased education and training. How do you do that? And the answer is that through better education, and you are able to sort of have more labor productivity, you increase aggregate supply, and you can achieve economic growth to happen. Does that make sense, guys? Are we good? Any questions about this so far? Lastly, guys, we can do what we call improve transportation and infrastructure. Uh, Clearly, when you have economic growth happening, infrastructure becomes better. Sometimes better infrastructure can lead to more economic growth, of course, because it can lower the cost for the firms to supply goods to the market. So this could be an important thing to consider. So improving transport infrastructure becomes an important thing as well. Make sense? Any questions, guys, about this so far? So supply side policies are very important. Now, I want to talk about quickly demand side. I mean, policies to control inflation. This is the last discussion we have, honestly, but I just want to talk about policies to control inflation, just to have a quick roadmap, and then we can discuss these policies more in detail tomorrow. So when you look at policies to control inflation, again, we can look at demand side policies for and supply side policies. So demand side policies are very useful for demand pull inflation. Right? The supply side policies will be useful for both, you know, demand pull inflation and for uh, cost push inflation. Okay, why? Because if there's too strong demand, so this is basically the idea is just that if the AD is rising, what we could do is basically we can control that through what we call contractionary contractionary fiscal and monetary policy. Isn't that true? So, what do we need to do, guys? What we need to do is if AD is rising and you have demand pull inflation happening, you can basically you could make the government expenditure go down or taxes to go up, which will make the AD go down. So, that's your fiscal policy. Also, you could do this, that you could make the money supply to go up, to go down, in fact, causing interest rate to go up. And when the interest rate goes up, we know this consumption will fall, investment will fall, and so will AD will fall. Make sense? So that's the idea of your fiscal and monetary policy, which is controlling AD. But supply side policies, because they make the aggregate supply curve shift to the right, they make the aggregate supply curve shift to the right, they can control both demand pull and cost push. Cost push में क्या हो रहा है? What is happening in cost push? AS is going up. What is happening in demand pull? AD is going down. So both can be fixed through what we call uh, supply side policies. So the biggest advantage of supply side policies, of course, is that it can tackle both kinds of inflation, the demand pull inflation as well as cost push inflation. Does that make sense, guys? Are we good? Now, tomorrow's discussion, we're going to talk about, you know, the anti-inflationary policies that I've just talked about. But we talk about the evaluation of these policies. We talk about the pros and cons, and then we will be done with the course tomorrow. And then Thursday we'll just review. I'll do some data responses with you for Thursday. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good day.